Colorado Territory, 1871. The frontier town of Timber Creek sat nestled against the foothills of the Rocky Mountains like a stubborn splinter that refused to be removed by the harsh winds of winter or the blistering summer sun. Frontier settlements came and went in this unforgiving land, but Timber Creek had persisted, growing from a mining outpost to a proper town with a general store, a church, and even a schoolhouse, though the latter remained mostly empty. Gwendolyn Lambert stepped down from the stagecoach, her 22-year-old legs stiff from the 3-day journey. Her emerald traveling dress, once crisp and proper when she departed St. Louis, now bore the dust of the trail and hung limp in the dry mountain air. She adjusted her small-brimmed hat that barely contained her thick chestnut hair, which she'd pinned up in a futile attempt at maintaining Eastern propriety. "Miss Lambert, I presume?" An older woman with a weathered face approached. "I'm Mrs. Patterson. We've been expecting you." Gwen nodded, suddenly aware of the stares from the townspeople. She was a curiosity, a young, unmarried woman from back east, come to teach in their frontier school. What they didn't know was that teaching was merely her excuse. Adventure, her late father had always promised. The West is where true adventure awaits, Gwendolyn. Now he was gone, and Boston society had expected her to settle into a proper marriage with one of her father's associates. Men twice her age with cold hands and calculated smiles. The frontier had called to her instead, promising freedom from the constraints that threatened to suffocate her. "The frontier is no place for a lady seeking romance," Mrs. Patterson said as she led Gwen toward the small cabin that would serve as both schoolhouse and living quarters. "Out here, it's about survival, not courtship. Best remember that." Gwen smiled politely but thought to herself, "I haven't come for romance. I've come for adventure, for wilderness, for the stories Father always told. Love is a cage, and I've just escaped one. I won't be caught in another." Her first week in Timber Creek proved her right. The town was rough, the children wilder than she'd anticipated, and the amenities she'd taken for granted in Boston, running water, proper bathing facilities, variety in food, were luxuries here. But there was something intoxicating about the vast open spaces, the mountains that changed colors with the shifting light, the sense that she was finally writing her own story. On her second Sunday in town, after church service, Gwen decided to explore beyond the settlement's boundaries. She'd borrowed an aging mare named Buttercup from Mrs. Patterson, assuring the concerned woman she'd stay within sight of town. That promise lasted precisely 30 minutes before the allure of a flowering meadow drew her farther into the foothills. She dismounted to gather wildflowers, varieties she'd never seen in Boston, when Buttercup suddenly whinnied and bolted, startled by a rattlesnake that slithered through the grass. Gwen called after the horse, but Buttercup disappeared over a ridge, leaving her stranded miles from town. "Well, this is the adventure I wanted," she muttered, gathering her skirts and starting the long walk back. The late spring sun beat down, and her impractical shoes, the sturdiest she owned but still designed for Boston streets, began to raise blisters. An hour into her trek, the sound of hoofbeats approached from behind. Gwen turned to see a rider atop a magnificent chestnut quarter horse, moving with the fluid grace that comes only from a lifetime in the saddle. "Appears you're a long way from town, ma'am," the rider called as he slowed his mount. Gwen shaded her eyes against the sun. The cowboy couldn't have been more than 25, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a clear Montana sky. His light brown hair curled slightly beneath his hat, and a day's worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. Unlike the weathered, hardened men of Timber Creek, there was a youthful vitality to him, despite the obvious strength in his shoulders and arms. "My horse was frightened by a snake," she explained, trying to maintain her dignity despite her disheveled appearance. "She ran off in that direction." The cowboy nodded. "Buttercup recognized her passing my camp. She's prone to spooking, not the best mount for exploring." He extended his hand. "Name's Henry Miller. Most folks call me Hank. Gwendolyn Lambert, the new schoolteacher." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Heard we had a teacher from back east. Didn't expect to find her wandering the foothills alone." "I was seeking adventure," Gwen admitted, then immediately regretted her candor. "And wildflowers for the schoolhouse." Hank's lips twitched with amusement. "Well, Miss Lambert, adventure found you. Question is, what are you planning to do now that you're lost, shoeless, and about 2 hours from sundown in mountain lion country. The words mountain lion sent a chill through her. This was not the adventure she'd envisioned. I suppose I'll accept your assistance, Mr. Miller, if you're offering. Without further comment, he extended his arm and swung her up behind him with surprising ease. Hold tight, he instructed. We'll fetch Buttercup first, then get you back to town. Gwen hesitated only briefly before wrapping her arms around his waist. The intimacy of the position would have scandalized Boston society, but out here, practicality trumped propriety. As they rode, Hank explained that he worked at the Circle M Ranch, 10 miles outside of town. We've got a cattle drive coming up. I was scouting the foothills for strays when I spotted your horse. You're a cowboy, then? She asked, immediately feeling foolish for the obvious question. He chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. Born and raised. 3rd generation on my family's ranch. Though cowboy seems to carry all sorts of notions for Easterners. Like what? She challenged. Like we're all wild gunslingers or romantic figures from dime novels, he said. Truth is, it's mostly hard work, little sleep, and constantly smelling like cattle. That hardly sounds like the romantic adventure my father described, Gwen said before she could stop herself. They crested a ridge, and Hank pulled his horse to a stop. Spread before them was a valley bathed in the golden light of late afternoon, a ribbon of silver river winding through cottonwoods and aspens just beginning to leaf out. Your father wasn't entirely wrong, Hank said quietly. There's moments out here that make the hardship worthwhile. Gwen felt something shift inside her as she gazed at the landscape. This was what she'd come for. Not just escape from Boston's constraints, but moments of transcendent beauty that made her feel truly alive. They found Buttercup grazing peacefully near a stream and headed back to town. When they arrived, the sight of the proper schoolteacher riding double with the young rancher caused a stir that Gwen knew would fuel gossip for weeks. I can't thank you enough, she said as he helped her dismount in front of her cabin. Maybe you can, Hank replied. The schoolhouse needs repairs. I'm handy with tools, could fix that leaky roof and broken steps come Saturday. Before she could respond, Mrs. Patterson emerged from her home across the street, her expression a mixture of relief and disapproval. Consider it repayment, Gwen said quickly. For the rescue. Hank tipped his hat. Saturday then. True to his word, Hank arrived early Saturday morning with tools and lumber. Gwen, who'd planned to use the day for lesson preparation, found herself instead handing him nails and holding boards as he worked. What brought you out west, really? He asked as they took a break, sharing cool water and the fresh bread Gwen had baked. Freedom, she answered honestly. Adventure. In Boston, my path was predetermined. Marriage to a suitable man, a proper household, children raised to follow the same pattern. After my father died, there was nothing holding me there. And now you're here, teaching frontier children their letters, Hank observed. Teaching gives me purpose and independence, Gwen said. But I came for more than that. I came to experience everything my father told me about, the wilderness, the mountains, the sense that life here is more authentic. Hank's eyes studied her with unexpected intensity. The West isn't just beautiful vistas, Miss Lambert. It's harsh, unforgiving. People die from simple mistakes out here. Are you warning me away from my adventures, Mr. Miller? She challenged. No, he said after a pause. But adventure requires respect. The mountains, the weather, the land, they don't care about your dreams or desires. They'll kill you just the same if you're careless. His words should have frightened her, but instead, they resonated with a truth she'd sensed but couldn't articulate. Then perhaps I need a guide, she said, surprised by her own boldness. Something flickered in his eyes. Interest, challenge, or perhaps warning. Perhaps you do. But I should warn you. I'm not the romantic figure from your father's stories either. Good, Gwen replied. I've had enough of stories. I came west for reality. As spring bloomed into summer, Hank became a regular visitor to the schoolhouse. He brought books for her small library, helped organize a picnic for her students, and gradually began taking Gwen on carefully planned excursions into the surrounding wilderness. On their 3rd such outing, as they sat beside an alpine lake so clear it reflected the mountains like a mirror, Gwen finally asked the question that had been forming. Why are you doing this, Hank? Surely a young rancher has better uses for his free time than escorting a schoolteacher around the countryside. Hank skipped a stone across the lake's surface, watching it bounce 5 times before sinking. My mother was a teacher, he said finally. Came west like you, full of dreams about frontier life. Met my father during her first year teaching. She loved books and learning right up until the fever took her 10 years ago. I'm sorry, Gwen said softly. Don't be. She lived the life she chose. But she always said the greatest gift of the frontier was choice, the freedom to decide who you want to be, without the weight of tradition pressing down. He turned to face her, his expression serious. I'm not courting you, Miss Lambert. I know you came west for adventure, not a husband. But I enjoy your company, your perspective. Is that reason enough? The honesty disarmed her. In Boston, men always had agendas, hidden motivations. Hank's straightforwardness was as refreshing as the mountain air. It's reason enough, she agreed. Though you should call me Gwen if we're to be friends. Gwen, he repeated, her name sounding different in his voice, warmer somehow, more substantial. That night, as she prepared for bed in her small cabin, Gwen realized something unsettling. For all her talk of seeking adventure, she found herself looking forward more to Hank's visits than to the wilderness explorations themselves. The thought troubled her. She hadn't come west to fall under a man's influence, no matter how respectful or kind he might be. Independence, she reminded herself. Adventure, not romance. Romance led to marriage, and marriage, especially out here, meant the end of freedom. She'd seen it with the frontier wives, their lives consumed by endless work, children, and the struggle to maintain homes in this harsh environment. No, she would enjoy Hank's friendship and guidance, but guard her heart carefully. The frontier offered too many possibilities to sacrifice them for love. By July, the cattle drive Hank had mentioned was imminent. I'll be gone about 6 weeks, he told her during his last visit before departure. Taking 3,000 head to the railhead in Cheyenne. Gwen felt an unexpected pang at the thought of such a long absence. That sounds like a grand adventure, she said, keeping her tone light. Dusty, exhausting, dangerous work is what it is, Hank corrected, though his eyes held a hint of excitement that belied his words. But it's what keeps the ranch running. He hesitated, then reached into his saddlebag. Brought you something. For while I'm gone. It was a small leather-bound journal, its cover tooled with a simple mountain scene. For recording your adventures, he explained. Thought you might want to remember them properly. The thoughtfulness of the gift touched her deeply. Thank you, Hank. I'll have it filled by your return. Just be careful which adventures you choose, he warned, but his smile softened the caution. Promise me you won't go exploring the high country alone. The summer storms come fast, and the terrain is treacherous even for those who know it well. I promise, she agreed, though part of her bristled at being told to limit her explorations. The day after Hank's departure with the cattle drive, Timber Creek received visitors of a different sort. 3 men rode in, trail-worn and hard-eyed, led by a sharply dressed man who introduced himself as Gilbert Eastwood, representative of the Western Mining Company. We've discovered significant silver deposits in the mountains above town, he announced to the gathered townspeople. The company's prepared to offer employment to any able-bodied men and fair payment for supply services. The town buzzed with excitement. Mining meant prosperity, growth, perhaps even a railroad connection eventually. Only Mrs. Patterson seemed concerned. Those mining companies are vultures, she told Gwen that evening. They come, strip the land, pollute the streams, and leave ghost towns in their wake. But Gwen found herself intrigued, especially when Eastwood visited the schoolhouse the following day. Miss Lambert, he greeted her with a tip of his expensive hat. I understand you're relatively new to our frontier. I thought perhaps you might appreciate a guided tour of our preliminary mining operations. Quite a fascinating process, and perfectly safe, I assure you. Here was adventure presenting itself while Hank was away. Despite her promise, the temptation to see something new, something few women were invited to witness, was strong. I'd be delighted, she heard herself say. For educational purposes, of course. Eastwood's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Of course. I'll send a wagon for you tomorrow morning. The mining camp was a 3-hour journey into the mountains, along a rough road that followed a stream now running cloudy with silt. A dozen temporary structures had been erected, and men worked with picks and shovels at the mountainside. We're just beginning, Eastwood explained as he helped Gwen from the wagon. But our geologists assure us this will be one of the richest strikes in Colorado territory. As he guided her through the operation, Gwen noticed details that troubled her: the haphazard cutting of trees, the discolored water flowing from the test shafts, the workers' exhausted expressions. This wasn't the respectful relationship with the land that Hank had described. This was exploitation. "And where does the contaminated water go?" she asked, pointing to a stream of murky runoff. Eastwood's expression tightened momentarily. "It naturally filters through the soil, Miss Lambert. Perfectly harmless. Now, shall we see the assayer's office?" By the time they returned to the wagon for the journey back, storm clouds had gathered over the peaks. The driver glanced nervously at the sky. "Mr. Eastwood, sir, we ought to leave now if we're to beat that storm." "Nonsense," Eastwood replied. "We have time for Miss Lambert to see the primary shaft. It's the most impressive part of the operation." Against her better judgment, Gwen allowed herself to be led to a tunnel entrance cut into the mountainside. They had barely entered when a crack of thunder shook the air, followed by the distinctive rumble that Gwen had learned to recognize during her time in the mountains. "Rockslide," someone shouted from outside. Eastwood grabbed her arm, pulling her deeper into the shaft as debris tumbled across the entrance, partially blocking it. When the rumbling stopped, they could still see daylight, but the opening was now half its previous size. "Are you hurt?" Eastwood asked, his voice tight with what sounded more like irritation than concern. "No," Gwen replied, gathering her wits. "But we should leave immediately. That storm will pass," he interrupted, "and my men will clear the entrance. Meanwhile, I can show you our initial silver vein." But Gwen's adventure-seeking spirit had been replaced by caution. Hank's warnings about respect for the mountain's dangers echoed in her mind. "Mr. Eastwood, I insist we leave now. That debris could be unstable." His grip on her arm tightened. "Miss Lambert, you seem to misunderstand your position. Your presence here serves a purpose beyond education." Cold realization washed over her. What purpose? The good people of Timber Creek trust their schoolteacher. When you return enthusiastic about our operation, it will help smooth relations as we expand. Your friend Miller and his ranching associates have been resistant to our presence. "You're using me," Gwen stated, anger replacing fear. "I prefer to think of it as employing all available resources," Eastwood replied. "Now, about that silver vein." A shout from the entrance interrupted him. "Mr. Eastwood, the creek's rising fast. We need to leave now or the road will be washed out." Even Eastwood couldn't ignore the urgency in the man's voice. They hastily exited the partially blocked tunnel to find the sky had opened, rain pouring down in sheets. The men helped them into the wagon, which immediately began the treacherous journey back toward town. They had traveled less than a mile when disaster struck. The swollen creek had undermined part of the crude road, causing it to collapse under the wagon's weight. Gwen found herself thrown into cold, rushing water, her heavy skirts immediately dragging her down. She fought against the current, gasping for breath, reaching desperately for anything solid. Her hand caught a protruding tree root, and she clung to it as the water tugged at her body. "Help!" she called, but her voice was lost in the roar of the storm. The men from the wagon were struggling with their own survival, scattered downstream. The route began to give way, and Gwen felt panic rising. This was not the glorious adventure she had imagined. This was death, cold and indifferent, in a mountain stream far from home. As her grip weakened, a strong hand suddenly grasped her wrist. Through the rain, she saw a familiar face, not Hank, but one of his ranch hands, a man named Patrick who had accompanied him to the schoolhouse once or twice. "Hold on, Miss Lambert," he shouted above the storm. With remarkable strength, he pulled her from the water's grip onto the muddy bank. "Thank God we found you," Patrick said as he wrapped his coat around her shivering form. "Hank would skin me alive if I let anything happen to you." "Hank?" she managed through chattering teeth. "He's with the cattle drive." Patrick shook his head. "Drive got delayed by a broken bridge. We were heading back to the ranch when we spotted Eastwood's wagon on this road. Hank sent us to investigate while he went for the doctor, just in case." As if summoned by his name, Hank appeared on horseback, his expression transforming from concern to visible relief when he saw Gwen alive. "You promised," were his first words as he dismounted, his voice tight with emotion. "I know," Gwen admitted, shame washing over her. "I broke my word." Hank's jaw clenched, but he said nothing more as he helped her onto his horse. The journey back to Timber Creek passed in strained silence, broken only by the diminishing storm. Dr. Franklin pronounced her lucky, no broken bones, just bruises and a mild case of exposure. Rest for a few days, he instructed before departing and leaving her alone with Hank, who stood by the window of her cabin, his posture rigid. "You could have died today," he finally said, his voice controlled but underlaid with an emotion she couldn't quite identify. "I know," Gwen repeated. "I was foolish." Why? The single word carried the weight of his disappointment. Why risk everything for a tour of a mining operation? The truth spilled out before she could contain it. "Because I came west for adventure, Hank. Not to be cautious, not to be safe. I wanted to experience everything. The danger, the beauty, the freedom. And nearly dying in a flooded creek. Was that worth the adventure?" His voice rose slightly, betraying his carefully maintained composure. "No," she admitted, tears threatening. "It wasn't." Hank crossed the room in 3 strides, kneeling beside her bed. "Gwen, adventure isn't about recklessness. It's about experiencing life fully, but you have to be alive to do that." His hand found hers, warm against her still-cold fingers. "When I saw that wagon go off the road, when I thought you might be..." He stopped, unable to continue. The realization struck her with the force of revelation. This man cared for her, deeply, genuinely. And despite all her protestations about independence and freedom, she had come to care for him too. "I'm sorry," she whispered. His fingers tightened around hers. "Just promise me, really promise this time, that you'll be more careful. The West will still be here tomorrow and the next day. You don't have to experience it all at once." "I promise," Gwen said, and this time she meant it. The following day, despite the doctor's orders, Gwen insisted on conducting her classes. The near disaster had been witnessed by several townspeople, and she felt a responsibility to demonstrate resilience to her students. "Miss Lambert," young Timothy asked during arithmetic, "is it true you nearly drowned because of the mining men?" "I nearly drowned because I made poor choices during a storm," Gwen corrected gently. "It's important we take responsibility for our actions, Timothy." After school, Mrs. Patterson visited, bringing soup and concern in equal measure. "That Eastwood is trouble," she declared. "Word is, he's trying to push the Circle M off their water rights to support his mining operation." Gwen's alarm must have shown on her face, because Mrs. Patterson nodded knowingly. "Ah, so young Miller hasn't mentioned that part. Men try to shield women from business concerns, though heaven knows we manage household accounts well enough." The information troubled Gwen deeply. Was this why Hank had been so opposed to the mining operation? Not just environmental concerns, but an existential threat to his family's ranch? Her questions had to wait, as the cattle drive preparations resumed the next day, and Hank departed with a promise to return in 6 weeks. "Keep that journal," he reminded her, "but fill it with safe adventures." The kiss he placed on her cheek before mounting his horse lingered long after he disappeared from view. In Hank's absence, Timber Creek changed rapidly. The mining company established a permanent office, bringing an influx of workers and money. A new saloon opened, followed by a hotel of questionable reputation. Weekend brawls became common, and Gwen found herself locking her door at night for the first time. Eastwood made a point of avoiding her after the incident, but she often saw him in town, speaking with influential citizens or entertaining at the new hotel. His smile never reached his eyes. For weeks into Hank's absence, the school board, now including 2 mining company representatives, called a meeting. "We're concerned about your curriculum, Miss Lambert," the chairman began. "These children need practical education, basic figures, enough reading to sign contracts. All this literature and history seems excessive for frontier children. Education isn't just practical training," Gwen argued. "It's about creating thinking citizens who understand their world and their place in it." "Their place," Eastwood interjected smoothly from the back of the room, "is likely to be in the mines or supporting mining operations. The silver boom will transform this territory. Best they be prepared for that reality." Gwen felt a chill at his words. This wasn't just about education. It was about controlling the future of Timber Creek itself. "I'll consider your suggestions," she said diplomatically, though inwardly, she had no intention of diminishing her teaching. That night, a knock at her door revealed Patrick, Hank's ranch hand, rain-soaked and anxious. "Miss Lambert, I've got a message from Hank." The drive finished early, good prices in Cheyenne. He's heading back, but there's trouble brewing. Eastwood's men have been damming the creek that supplies Circle M's water. Hank's mother and sister are alone at the ranch, and we're worried Eastwood might try something while most of the men are still on the trail home. What can I do? Gwen asked. Hank asked if you might stay at the ranch with his mother and sister, safety in numbers, and they're fond of you. Plus, having the schoolteacher there makes it harder for Eastwood to try anything too underhanded. The request surprised her. Of course I'll go. When? Tonight, if you're willing. I've got a wagon outside. The 3-hour journey to Circle M Ranch was made in darkness, with only occasional conversation to break the silence. Patrick explained that Hannah Miller, Hank's mother, was recovering from a fall and couldn't travel, while his 19-year-old sister, Sarah, refused to leave her. They're stubborn, the Miller women, Patrick said with obvious affection. Hank comes by it honestly. The ranch house emerged from the darkness, a substantial 2-story structure built of solid logs, with a wide porch and glass windows that spoke of prosperity earned through hard work. Lamplight glowed from within, and a woman's silhouette appeared at the door as they approached. Thank the Lord, she called out. Patrick, is that you? Did you find Miss Lambert? Sarah Miller proved to be a feminine version of her brother, the same clear blue eyes and direct gaze, though her hair was several shades darker. She welcomed Gwen with genuine warmth. Mother's asleep, but she'll be so pleased to meet you tomorrow, Sarah said as she showed Gwen to a comfortable bedroom. Hank's told us so much about you. Has he? Gwen asked, surprised. Sarah's smile turned mischievous. More than he realizes, I think. It's not what he says, exactly, but how his face changes when he speaks your name. Gwen felt heat rise to her cheeks. We're friends. He's been kind enough to show me the countryside, help with the schoolhouse. Of course, Sarah agreed, though her eyes sparkled with knowing. Just friends. Well, friend of my brother, we're glad to have you here. These have been tense days. The following morning, Gwen met Hannah Miller, a silver-haired woman whose strong resemblance to her son was evident despite her current frailty. She sat in a chair by the window, her splinted leg propped on a stool. So you're the schoolteacher who's turned my son's head, Hannah said without preamble. He was supposed to write to that Carson girl from the next county over, but he hasn't sent a single letter since you arrived in Timber Creek. Mother, Sarah exclaimed. You'll embarrass Miss Lambert. Nonsense. She looks like a woman who appreciates directness. Hannah's assessing gaze reminded Gwen so much of Hank that she couldn't help but smile. I do appreciate directness, Mrs. Miller, but I should clarify that your son and I are friends. I came west seeking adventure, not marriage. Hannah's eyebrows rose. Did you now? And have you found it? Adventure. Some, Gwen admitted. Though recently, it found me in ways I didn't anticipate. Hannah nodded knowingly. The mining company. Vultures, the lot of them. They're trying to steal what my husband and I built over 30 years. Water rights, grazing land, they want it all. Over the next few days, Gwen came to understand the depth of the threat facing Circle M. The creek that supplied water to the ranch had been reduced to a trickle by the mining operations dam upstream. The remaining water was fouled with mining residue, making it dangerous for both people and cattle. Hank's been fighting them legally, Sarah explained as they tended the kitchen garden. Filed complaints with the territorial authorities. But Eastwood has connections in Denver, and the process is slow. He offered to buy us out for a pittance, Hannah added from her chair on the porch. Said it was generous considering the water situation would only worsen, as if we'd abandon everything we've built. On the 4th night of Gwen's stay, trouble arrived in the form of 3 riders. Patrick, who had been keeping watch, burst into the house. Mining company men coming up the road. Arm. Hannah's expression hardened. Sarah, get the shotgun. Patrick, take position by the barn. Miss Lambert, you might want to remain inside. But Gwen had not come west to hide from conflict. I'll stand with you, Mrs. Miller. The older woman studied her for a moment, then nodded approval. Hank chose well, adventure seeker or not. They positioned themselves on the porch, Hannah seated with the shotgun across her lap, Sarah and Gwen flanking her. The riders approached slowly, stopping at a respectful distance when they saw the reception awaiting them. Evening, Mrs. Miller, the lead rider called. Mr. Eastwood sent us to check on your water situation. Heard you might be experiencing some difficulties. How thoughtful, Hannah replied, her voice laden with sarcasm. especially since your company's dam is what caused those difficulties. The man affected surprise. Dam? Ma'am, I don't know anything about a dam. But Mr. Eastwood is concerned about your welfare, living out here with most of your menfolk gone. He's prepared to offer assistance, or to renew his purchase offer. My answer hasn't changed, Hannah stated firmly. This land isn't for sale. Not now, not ever. The rider's gaze shifted to Gwen, recognition dawning. Miss Lambert, what brings the schoolteacher out to Circle M? I'm visiting friends, Gwen replied evenly. And I'll be sure to mention to the territorial governor's office how the mining company continues to harass a widowed rancher and her daughter. Governor Evans attended my father's funeral in Boston. I'm certain he'd be interested in my observations. The name dropping was a calculated risk. Gwen had indeed met the governor at a Boston function years ago, but doubted he'd remember her. Yet the threat of political connections visibly unsettled the men. No harassment intended, ma'am, the rider backpedaled. Just a neighborly visit. We'll be on our way. After they departed, Hannah gave Gwen an appraising look. Governor Evans, is it? Didn't mention you moved in such circles. An exaggeration, Gwen admitted. But they didn't know that. Hannah's laugh was unexpected and warm. You'll do, Miss Lambert. You'll do just fine. 2 days later, Hank returned. Gwen was in the garden harvesting vegetables when the sound of hoofbeats drew her attention. He dismounted before his horse had fully stopped, exhaustion evident in every line of his body, until he saw her. His face transformed, weariness replaced by relief and something deeper that made her heart quicken. Gwen, he said simply, crossing the yard in long strides. You came. Of course I came, she replied, suddenly shy under the intensity of his gaze. Hank Miller, don't you dare embrace that young woman covered in trail dust, Hannah called from the porch. Clean yourself up before you go making a fool of yourself. The moment broken, Hank grinned sheepishly. Yes, mother. That evening, after Hank had bathed and changed, he found Gwen on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple. He sat beside her, the swing swaying gently with his weight. Patrick told me about Eastwood's men visiting, he said. And your quick thinking. It wasn't much, Gwen demurred. It was everything, Hank countered. Mother says you stood with her like you were born to it. No fear. I was terrified, Gwen admitted. But not of them. I was afraid of failing you, your family. Hank's hand found hers on the swing between them. You could never fail me, Gwen. From the moment I found you stranded in that meadow, I've admired your courage, your determination to experience life on your own terms. The confession hung in the air between them. Gwen felt the walls she'd built around her heart, the ones meant to preserve her independence, begin to crumble. I came west for adventure, she said softly. Not for this. Not for feelings that complicate everything. And I never expected to find a Boston schoolteacher who would challenge everything I thought I knew about Eastern women, Hank replied. Yet here we are. The tension of the moment was broken by Sarah calling them in to dinner. But something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that could no longer be dismissed as mere friendship. The next morning, Hank and Patrick rode to inspect the mining company's dam. They returned grim-faced. It's worse than we thought, Hank reported to the family gathered in the kitchen. They've reinforced it, diverted nearly the entire flow. What little water reaches our land is unfit for drinking. We can haul water from the western spring, Patrick suggested. It'll be labor-intensive, but for how long? Hannah interrupted. Winter's coming. We can't haul water through snow. We fight, Hank stated firmly. I've written to the territorial court again, and I've hired a lawyer in Denver. Eastwood doesn't own the water. What he's doing is illegal. Legal or not, we need water now, Hannah pointed out. The cattle, I have an idea, Gwen interjected. All eyes turned to her. Eastwood cares about his reputation. He's trying to build relationships in Timber Creek, present himself as a respectable businessman. What if we expose his tactics publicly? How? Sarah asked. The town picnic next week, Gwen explained. Everyone attends. I could organize my students to present a special lesson on water rights and conservation. We could bring samples of the contaminated water, show what the mining operation is doing to the environment. Hank looked skeptical. Eastwood won't just stand by and let that happen. No, Gwen agreed. He'll try to stop it. And that's exactly what we want, him publicly opposing education about water conservation. It would reveal his true nature to the town. A slow smile spread across Hank's face. It's risky. I came west for adventure, Gwen reminded him. Just turns out the adventure that matters is helping people I care about, not chasing thrills. The plan required careful preparation. Gwen returned to Timber Creek to resume teaching, while secretly organizing her students for the special presentation. Hank visited frequently, ostensibly to help with schoolhouse maintenance, but actually to coordinate their strategy. During one such visit, as they sat on the schoolhouse steps watching the sunset, Hank brought up something unexpected. The cattle drive money, he said. It was good, better than expected. I've been thinking about expanding the ranch, building a new house. That sounds wonderful, Gwen encouraged. Your mother would probably appreciate more modern comforts. The house wouldn't be for Mother, Hank said quietly. It would be for the future. My future. The implication hung in the air between them. Gwen felt her heart race. Hank, you don't need to say anything, he interrupted gently. I know you came west for independence, for adventure. Not for a husband. I'm just telling you my plans, that's all. But his eyes said more. They spoke of hopes he dared not voice, of a future he could envision but wouldn't pressure her to share. The day of the town picnic dawned clear and warm. Gwen's students had prepared displays about water conservation, the importance of clean rivers for communities, and the legal rights of long-established ranches. They had practiced their presentations diligently, excited to showcase their learning to the town. As predicted, Eastwood caught wind of the plan. He arrived at the schoolhouse the morning of the picnic, his expression thunderous. Miss Lambert, I understand you're planning some sort of demonstration today. Educational presentation, Gwen corrected calmly. The children have been studying natural resources. I've spoken with the school board, Eastwood warned. They're concerned about political content in the classroom. This presentation will not proceed. The board approved my curriculum last month, Mr. Eastwood. The presentation proceeds as planned. Gwen stood her ground, though her heart hammered in her chest. Eastwood stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're making a powerful enemy, Miss Lambert. I can make life very difficult for a schoolteacher in a frontier town. And I can make public the fact that you threatened me, Gwen countered. How would that look to the respectable citizens you've been courting? For a moment, she thought he might strike her. Instead, he stepped back, his face a mask of controlled rage. This isn't over, he promised before stalking away. The picnic began at noon in the town square. Families spread blankets, shared food, and enjoyed the rare opportunity for community celebration. Gwen's students, dressed in their Sunday best, arranged their displays with pride. As the presentations began, Gwen noticed Eastwood and several of his men watching from the periphery. Their presence was intimidating, but she refused to be cowed. One by one, the children explained the importance of clean water, how mining operations could damage watersheds, and how the territorial laws protected established water rights. They passed around jars of cloudy, contaminated water from below the mining operation, contrasted with clear water from unpolluted streams. The townspeople listened with increasing concern. Many were simple people who hadn't fully understood the implications of the mining company's activities. Now, faced with visible evidence and straightforward explanations from children they knew and trusted, their perspectives began to shift. Midway through the presentations, Eastwood made his move. He stepped forward, addressing the gathered crowd. Friends and neighbors, he began with forced joviality. While this educational display is certainly creative, I must point out that these children have been misinformed. The Western Mining Company brings prosperity and progress to Timber Creek. These alarmist claims about water quality are exaggerated and irresponsible. He turned toward Gwen, his smile not reaching his eyes. Perhaps Miss Lambert should stick to teaching reading and arithmetic, rather than spreading ranchers' propaganda. A murmur ran through the crowd. Gwen felt a moment of doubt. Eastwood was persuasive, and many townspeople depended on the mining operation for income. Then Hank stepped forward, a jar of water in his hand. This is from the creek that has watered Circle M Ranch for 30 years. My father drank from it. My mother cooked with it. Our cattle thrived on it. Now it looks like this. He held up the cloudy jar. Not because of natural causes, but because Mr. Eastwood's operation has dammed the creek and polluted what little water remains. He turned to face Eastwood directly. You're not bringing prosperity. You're stealing resources that belong to all of us, poisoning land that was healthy before you arrived, and threatening those who stand in your way. Preposterous, Eastwood scoffed. Miller is simply afraid of progress. His outdated ranching operation can't compete with modern industry. It's not about competition. Hannah Miller's voice rang out as she made her way forward, leaning on Sarah's arm. Despite her still-healing injury, she stood tall. It's about respect, for the land, for the community, for the future. What happens when the silver runs out, Mr. Eastwood? When your company moves on, you'll leave behind poisoned water and ruined land. The crowd's mood was shifting palpably. Dr. Franklin stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of his respected position. I've seen increased illness since the mining operation began, stomach ailments, rashes. I suspected the water but couldn't prove it. These samples, he gestured to the children's display, confirm my fears. One by one, townspeople began to speak about changes they'd noticed in the streams, about sick livestock, about concerns for the future. The tide of public opinion was turning against Eastwood, and he knew it. His face flushed with anger. This is absurd. You can't stop progress. The territorial government supports our operation. Actually, interrupted a new voice. The territorial government is quite concerned about reports of water rights violations. All heads turned to see a well-dressed man dismounting from a horse at the edge of the square. He approached, removing his hat. Judge Wilson, Territorial Court, he introduced himself. I received multiple complaints about water rights violations and decided to investigate personally. Based on what I've witnessed today, both the evidence presented and Mr. Eastwood's response, I'm issuing an immediate injunction against the Western Mining Company's dam. Eastwood's face drained of color. You can't do that. We have investors, contracts. You have broken the law, sir, Judge Wilson stated flatly. Be grateful I'm not ordering your arrest on the spot. The dam comes down within 48 hours, or you and your associates will face criminal charges. The victory was swift and decisive. Within days, the mining company's dam was dismantled, water began flowing freely to Circle M Ranch again, and Eastwood departed Timber Creek, his grand plans in ruins. The town celebrated with another gathering, this one at Circle M Ranch. As sunset painted the mountains, Gwen found herself once again on the porch swing beside Hank. Your plan worked perfectly, he said, his shoulder warm against hers. The territorial court might never have acted without the public pressure you created. It was the children who convinced people, Gwen demurred. They spoke truth without political calculation. Like their teacher, Hank pointed out. You've changed this community, Gwen. Changed it for the better. In the golden light, his face was so earnest, so full of admiration that Gwen felt her carefully constructed defenses crumble completely. I came west for adventure, she said softly. For independence. I thought love would be a cage. And now? Hank asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Now I understand that the greatest adventure is loving someone deeply. That true independence isn't isolation. It's choosing who to build a life with. Hank took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. Gwendolyn Lambert, I've loved you since that day I found you stranded in a meadow, determined to have your adventure despite the obstacles. I love your courage, your intelligence, your fierce heart. He slipped from the swing to one knee, still holding her hand. I'm not asking you to end your adventures. I'm asking to share them with you, for all the days we have. Will you marry me? Tears blurred Gwen's vision as she looked at this man who had shown her that love could be a partnership, not a prison. That adventure could be found in building something meaningful together. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Hank Miller. I will marry you. Their wedding took place that autumn, as the aspens turned to gold against the evergreen mountainsides. The entire town attended, witnessing the union of their schoolteacher and the young rancher whose families had helped build the community. Gwen wore a simple white dress with wildflowers in her chestnut hair. Hank couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked toward him in the church, his face alight with joy and wonder. By spring, the new house Hank had spoken of was completed, a comfortable home built on a ridge overlooking the ranch, with wide windows to capture the mountain views Gwen loved so much. He had included a small library where she could continue her studies and prepare lessons, for she had insisted on maintaining her teaching position. A woman can be both a wife and a teacher, she had declared, and Hank had wholeheartedly agreed. On their first anniversary, they sat on the porch of their new home, watching the sunset paint the mountains in the same golden hues as the day they were married. Gwen's hand rested on her slightly rounded belly, their first child growing within. Any regrets? Hank asked, his arm around her shoulders. About trading adventure for marriage? Gwen smiled, leaning into his embrace. I didn't trade adventure for marriage, she corrected. I found the greatest adventure in loving you, in building this life together. She looked out over the land they steward, the mountains that had called to her, the community they had helped to shape. I came west seeking adventure and found a cowboy's love instead. But the truth is, Hank, loving you has been the most magnificent adventure of all. As the last light faded from the peaks and the first stars appeared, they remained together on the porch, their future stretching before them like the vast western sky, filled with challenges, certainly, but also with the promise of shared joys, deep connection, and adventures they would face hand in hand.